Hello everyone, welcome to the Escaping To-Do List Hell webinar. This is something that if you're in our 30-day challenge, you might have seen we've been discussing in the Facebook group, because a lot of the time anxiety is caused by real problems, and what I mean by that is that it's not always just existential crises about how horrible reality is. Sometimes a lot of our anxiety is caused by the fact that we just have a million things on our to-do list, and there's things that we need to sort out and things that we need to sort out for our families and in our relationships and work, and suddenly there's a million things on our to-do list and it's totally freaking us out, and it just seems like there's too much pressure there, and that also that some kind of clever anxiety strategy isn't going to help because we've got real problems. And that I don't think that's the case. I think there are some great solutions out there that, even though we're dealing with real issues, we can use to solve these problems. And that's what we're going to go through in today's lesson. So if I head back over to the slides. So now's a great time to switch off any distractions if you've got Skype running, your phone, all that kind of stuff, and really spend the next 30-40 minutes, however long this takes, to invest in yourself and hopefully making things a little bit easier, a little bit better. So just a quick intro for people who don't know me. Maybe you're watching this webinar for the first time, you're not in the 30-day challenge. I'm Chris, and I'm founder of the mental health charity Anxiety Leads, and also founder of Warwick Anxiety, which is the organisation doing this webinar. I say organisation, there's three of us. I'm also the author of Technical Anxiety, the complete guide to what is anxiety and what to do about it, and Do More, Worry Less, Small Steps to Reduce Your Anxiety, which is coming out next month. Really excited about that. Should have had some of those handy to show you, I guess, but I haven't. So let's crack on with the lessons. So I've been running the charity for 4 years, and I've written a few books and whatever, but my big thing is about evidence-based. And so if you think like a book like Technical Anxiety, we've got 211 references in there. Do More, Worry Less is even more, I think 291, because I really want everything in there to be very anxiety focused and evidence based. So I don't just want to give you some kind of personal experience from me. I want to point you to where the science really works. And if that's your kind of thing, then you're in the right place, because that's the kind of thing that we do at Warwick Anxiety. So you should be here if you feel a lot of anxiety and you feel that's caused by real things because you're overwhelmed by the amount of stuff that you have to do. And what you want to be able to do is better manage these tasks, or cope with the stress of having them, or just generally reduce some of that anxiety that you feel and really get rid of some of those problems. Ideally, that's what we're going to be covering today. And I've been there. Life is really hard. The world doesn't stop just because you feel burnt out or just because everything's going wrong. And one of the big problems is it's not just that we're putting these pressure on ourselves, it's that we have relationships and family, and there's a lot of external pressure which creates the pressure on us because people rely on us. Like, we're important people, right, in our own little world. Maybe not in the grand scheme of things, but in our own world, people like our family rely on us, and that creates a lot of pressure. And it's difficult balancing work and family and friends and, being a good father, being a good husband or wife and mother, whatever situation you're in. These things are tough, but luckily there are some solutions. And so what we're going to cover today is why anxiety is at the root of these problems, because it's not just that we have these real problems, because a lot of people do, right? And for some reason we're more anxious than them. And so we're going to look at why anxiety is the root of these issues, and then we're going to look at some strategies for actually getting more done and being happier about it, which is important, right? Some things we can't get rid of, but if we can find a way to be more positive about them and have less anxiety, then that would be brilliant. And at the end, I'll briefly say a bit about Wolfach anxiety, and I have a free little gift for you as well, a workbook to go with this, so stick around for that. So I want you to start by picturing a lovely mountain valley, as I've done here, because this is going to form the basis of what we're going to be looking at today. Because if you think about, say, a lake in a mountain, what happens is that water comes in on the left side from up the hill, and it sits in this basin for a while, and then it moves out on the right. And this is the same as your tasks, right? You've got some tasks that are coming in. When you tick them off, then they go out, and hopefully there's not too many sitting there in the middle. So we're stood in the middle of the valley. That's us, that little figure. And whenever more tasks come in, the water level goes up a bit, and when tasks go out, then the water level goes down. And so if too many tasks come in and not enough tasks go out, then suddenly we're underwater, which is when we feel overwhelmed by the amount of stuff, right? And at that point, well, we better be good swimmers or we're going to drown. So there's really 3 ways that we can help reduce all this anxiety about the amount of stuff we have to do. And that is that we can reduce the water coming in, have less tasks going on to our to-do list. We can increase the water going out, getting more efficient at getting rid of those tasks. Or we can get better at swimming, which is basically learning to be a bit more happier and positive and be able to cope with the stress of having all these tasks on our to-do list. So we're gonna look at strategies to deal with all 3 of these segments today in turn, and I think adding them all together it'll provide us small nuggets in each area, which will add up to some big results overall. And before we get to that, I want to look at a few common thinking distortions. And these are very common with anxiety, and it's great to learn to spot these, because the way that we tend to think about a problem can often be different to the way a muggle, someone without anxiety, thinks about the problem. So, for example, we catastrophize, magnifying danger out of all proportion. We live by fixed rules such as, oh, I should do this or I must do this, even though maybe that's not the case. I have a lot of all or nothing thinking, which is, for example, if something doesn't go perfect, then it's a complete waste of time. And of course, obviously, that's not true. Personalising, taking responsibility when anything bad happens, unrealistic expectations is where we set that mega high standard for ourselves. And of course, we fail to hit that standard because nobody could hit that standard because it's just unachievably high. And then we feel bad about not doing it. These are all really common with anxiety. You might have seen a list similar to this before if you've done cognitive behavioural therapy. And throughout this, let's keep an eye on these and see if we can spot these, because they'll be quite revealing, I think, as to when anxiety is causing some of our problems. So step 1, less water flowing in. How do we end up with less problems that we have to deal with? And 3 steps to this, I think: the art of saying no, curbing volunteering, and not sweating the small things. So the art of saying no is, do you do everything that people ask of you? And for many people with anxiety, the answer is yes. Maybe not everything, but in general, we're people that say yes. If someone asks us to do something, then we feel we have to do it out of some kind of social responsibility to the relationship, right? And believe it or not, this is a form of social anxiety. And you might think, well, hang on, Chris, I don't have social anxiety. I'm fine interacting and talking with people. This isn't really something that affects me. But it's not actually just social anxiety, the kind of shyness style, even though it's way more than shyness, of course. But that kind of style of social anxiety. Actually, just being a yes person that can't say no to anyone can be a form of social anxiety as well. And what's at the root of this is that we're worried that people will stop liking us. So we're worried if we say no to whatever unreasonable task they ask us to do, that if we say no, they will stop being our friend, and then we'll lose all our friends because we start saying no to people, and then we end up alone, living by ourselves with no friends at age 70 in a little house, dying alone where nobody notices. Obviously, I'm taking that to the nth degree, but the truth is that is the subconscious conversation we're having with ourselves, is that once you start saying no, all your friends will leave you, and it's catastrophizing, right? We jump from saying, no, I can't pick you up, or no, I can't just do that little task for you, to, oh, if I say no to that, my friends will leave me and I'll die alone. And that's not going to happen. I don't think any of us really think that will happen. But in our anxious brain, that's what our subconscious is thinking. So what can we do about it? Well, think of it like a cognitive behavioural therapy experiment where we challenge these beliefs and ask yourself, what are actually the consequences of saying no? Because actually when we say yes and we take on these millions of tasks, we're making ourselves miserable. So even if we did start saying no and our friends did leave us, which they won't, because that's never happened ever, they're not really a friend if they do, then are you going to be more miserable than you are now? Because anxiety does make us miserable, right? It's an issue. And so we also need to just practice saying no. When people ask us to do stuff, we've got to ask ourselves if it's really something important, something that we care about. And if not, then we just need to say no. And if you need to make an excuse to do that, that's fine, I think. Just, saying, I have other priorities and doing this would detract from them, which is the honest answer, right? We all have so much stuff to do. And when we say yes to one thing, it takes time away from something else that is also important in our lives. So practice the art of saying no and learn to push back a bit when people try and throw things onto your to-do list. Secondly, curbing volunteering. This may be one for you, may not be something, but I know it's not always people asking me to do things. It's when something needs doing, I find it very difficult not to stick my hand straight in the air and say, yeah, I'll do that and I'll take responsibility and pile more things on my to-do list. And there's two reasons why we tend to do this, I think. One is that doing stuff is a great distraction from anxiety. So a lot of the time, a lot of people with anxiety will fill up their diaries as much as possible, because any time spent doing some kind of community group or volunteering or whatever, it's time that you don't have to think about your anxiety. And there's also a need for control, I think. A lot of anxiety is driven by the unknown and being out of control. And so if you volunteer to take something on, then you get full control over it, and that eases our anxious minds in the short term, even though it makes us unhappy in the long term. And I really have been there with this one. A couple of years ago, I was running 8 different community groups. Those are all the different logos on the screen, because I wanted to be involved in everything, and I thought I had something really valuable to contribute. And I think that's kind of true, but of course, the more stuff I joined, the more watered down my time for each one of them was, because you've only got so many times. So I was running these 8 groups, and that was on top of my relationship and work, and I was kind of scared to hand some of them off because other people would do them wrong. And the problem, of course, if you do this, is that you just end up burnt out, and you might not be volunteering for organisations. You might find that even with your family and your friends and your kids, you're not willing to delegate the task to your husband or your kids because they'll do it wrong. And it's really tough, that feeling of, I could give this to someone else, but they'll do it wrong and I want this doing correctly. Whether it's loading the dishwasher, which other people can do wrong if they don't do it your way, to the bigger things in life, like running a local community group or doing an important task at work. Whether it's big or small, there is, I think, a lot of fear around letting other people do it and doing it wrong. So what do we do about this? Well, the truth is that other people will do it wrong because we as anxiety sufferers set incredibly higher standards for ourselves, or stands, as the slide said there. And other people have lower standards because they're not constantly worrying. But the truth is that that's okay. The art of delegation is letting other people do it, even though you know that they will do it to a lower standard than you would. And it's hard, right? In fact, I've got a quote on the next slide. The art of delegation is tolerating someone else doing the job, even though they won't do it as you would. And that is the art of delegation. It literally is. It's very easy to see this in business, that if you give a task to someone else, they're not going to do it as well as you, because the reason that you're, like a manager or whatever, is because you're really good at doing that. And it's the same in our personal lives. I have the way that I want to stack the dishwasher. If I delegate that task to someone else, they're going to do it a different way, which I think is an inferior way. But if I insist on doing it on myself, I'm just going to be miserable with the amount of stuff that I have to do, and it's going to be pretty horrible. So it's kind of like practicing letting other people do it badly and not freaking out about it that helps us, again, remove some of those tasks by letting other people do it. And you can also not do a task. That's an option. Like, I've got loads of plants on my balcony and they need watering to stay alive, which is fine. But if I'm so busy to water them, then like the worst case scenario is they're going to die and I have to replant them. And that isn't great, but if that's time I have to take away from spending with my daughter just to water some plants, is that really important? Which leads on to point 3 of reducing the intake, which is don't sweat the small stuff, which is a bit of a cliche, and this is a cliche as well, but if you got diagnosed with terminal illness tomorrow, would the task you're working on seem as important as it is now? And of course, the answer is no. And we find ourselves, I think this is, on the common thinking distortions, this is catastrophizing and this is living by fixed rules. Like if I don't water my plants, they die. That feels like a catastrophe to me, but it's not. I need to buy my daughter a high chair at the moment. I've just been so busy, and the time that I have got, I want to spend with her doing fun things rather than dragging her around the shops trying to find a high chair for her. And is it a disaster? Well, probably not. Maybe it doesn't happen quite as quick, but so what? It's not the end of the world. What's important in life is the social interactions that we have with other people. That's the key thing, right? Spending quality time with the people we love, and anything else just isn't as important as that. Look, I like a clean kitchen. I love having a clean kitchen. I'm kind of a little OCD about that. But my daughter, she doesn't really like a clean kitchen, to be honest. And all the time I spend cleaning with her, like taking her around the shops, is time I've spent cleaning my kitchen rather than spending quality time with her. And that's pretty rubbish, to be honest. I don't really think that's a good use of my time. So we need to focus on the important stuff. And, the consequences aren't that bad. A lot of the time we're catastrophizing, but it's just not going to be the end of the world. The kitchen doesn't get cleaned. I can clean it tomorrow, or it can stay dirty. I don't want my plants, some of them die. I have to replant them. I don't walk the dog, then the dog misses a walk, but it gets walked tomorrow. Or I don't answer that email, maybe at all, and maybe I don't even read the email, and I miss out on something important, or I miss out on a special offer to save £4 on my next book or whatever because I didn't read the email with a discount code in. Who cares? And it's not easy to say that, right? Just to tell ourselves this isn't important. What's important is spending time with my loved ones, and it's another thing that just takes practice. But if you practice it enough, then you really just have to go through that pain of not doing stuff and ignoring stuff and allowing stuff not to get done and seeing that life does go on and that we're okay. So get more flowing out. That will hopefully reduce some of the tasks going in. How do we shove more tasks out the other end to keep that water level as low as possible? 3 things again here. 1, dealing with perfectionism. 2, asking for help. And 3, facing resistance. So what does that mean? Well, let's start with perfectionism. And this is especially true if you're quite big on the OCD side of things, is that we often think that everything has to be perfect. But the reality is that something has to be just good enough. And this is something I catch myself doing all the time. If I'm writing a speech or a book, I want to keep going back to it and making improvements and, just sucking up all the time that there is. And there's no clear cutoff, right? If you've got like a week to prepare a presentation, how long do you spend on it? Do you spend the entire week? Do you allocate some time? If you're like me, you probably do it, and then you probably think about all these things you want to change, and you go back and it just nibbles away at your time. And the same with if I'm having people around for dinner, I can spend days preparing, and I have done in the past. Or I could throw something together to the last minute, and we probably have still have a great time, right? But it's so easy to let that time suck everything in and not strike it off your to-do list until you're 100% happy. And I think this is a classic case of all or nothing thinking that we looked at in those common thinking distortions. Because, if you've got a project, or maybe you're planning a party or cooking a dinner or whatever it is, or preparing a presentation at work, it can suck up as much time as you want. And it's easy to think, I need to make this perfect. But actually, if you spend half the time on it, it's not just going to be half as good, it's going to be like 90% as good, right? Because of the law of diminishing returns. We make great headway early on, and then to reach perfection, slows down. So actually, if we halve the time we're spending on things and then strike it off our to-do list, we're going to end up with something 90% of good, and we're going to end up with loads more time. And this occurs with shopping loads. Like, if you're Barry Schwartz talks about this in his book, The Paradox of Choice. If you're trying to buy a kettle, then you could spend months, weeks researching the perfect kettle. And at the end, you would genuinely have the best kettle on the market. But how miserable would we make ourselves doing a month of research on the perfect kettle? Or we could just go to the first store, pick the kettle that looks the nicest, and then just buy it and leave. And we're probably not going to end up with the best kettle, but we probably are going to end up with a kettle that boils water, which is what we really want it to do, and we're not going to have to go through the misery of doing all of that. So unless we're talking about like your grand purpose in life, like this is the thing that you need to get perfect to achieve your dream, then it's give up the idea that it needs to be perfect and embrace the idea that it'll be good enough. And as soon as it's good enough, strike it off your to-do list. It is done. Secondly, asking for help. And often anxiety sufferers are really bad at this because we think it's weak to ask for help, and we find it embarrassing to go to someone else and say, no, I need help with this, because we talked earlier, common thinking distortions, about unreasonably high standards. And that's what's going on here, right? We think that we should be able to do everything, and we don't accept our anxiety as a limitation. We think we should still be able to blast through life doing everything ourselves, and we should never have to ask people for help. And, when we ask someone for help, then that breaks our illusion that we are perfect and can handle everything. And because our subconscious doesn't want to admit that we are imperfect, then it really doesn't want to ask for help, because it's clear that we are imperfect once we ask. And it takes courage to ask for help. That's what it comes down to. It's having that, really being able to get over that feeling of not wanting to ask and being embarrassed to ask is difficult. And maybe some of us worry that it will weaken the relationship if we're constantly relying on other people. But of course, we're never going to be doing that. And people ask us for help all the time. And what you actually find is that when you share problems and tasks with other people, then that actually strengthens relationships. It doesn't weaken them, it strengthens them. And that fear that if we ask someone to do everything in our life for us, then they're going to be overloaded and not like us. It's never going to happen, because we have anxiety, right? We're only going to ask people for help when we really need it. And a lot of the time, it might not even be our fault that this is going on. So, like a couple of years ago, me and my friends always go on holiday every year, and it's no one's task really to organise it. Like, there's no assigned leader of the group. But I tend to do a lot of it because I constantly worry about this stuff. And that's personalising from the common thinking distortions, right? It's everybody's issue, but I'm taking it personally as my issue. And as long as you keep doing stuff, then people will leave it for you to do, because everyone's lazy, right? No one wants extra work. So if there's a group of people and they know that you're going to do it, then they're not going to take it on themselves. Whereas what you find is when you ask them for help, or you say, look, it's everyone's responsibility, I'm not taking this on myself because I'm already totally stressed out with the amount of stuff I do, then someone else generally picks the ball up. And if they don't, then that's not your fault either. If you think so, again, you're personalising. So, the idea of the holiday, someone else steps up and organises it, or we don't go on holiday and we go next year. And they've learnt the lesson that I'm not just going to be the dog's body that does it every year. So ask for help. It's difficult, but it will make your life easier. Facing resistance. So we can really measure our tasks on two metrics, right? One is the priority. We've got 10 things in our to-do list. We can order them most important first, second most important, third most important. But we can also order them in terms of resistance. For example, let's say you've got a phone call to make and you hate using the phone. So that's a really high resistance task that you don't want to do. And actually it's only number 3 on your to-do list. What should you tackle first thing in the morning? Well, traditional logic suggests that what you should tackle is your priority number 1, because that's the most important thing to get done, right? But if you can roughly work out what you can do in a day, What you're actually better doing is reordering them to put the high resistance tasks first. So if you've got a phone call to make and you hate making phone calls, that should be number one first thing you do on a morning. Why is this? Because we only have so much motivation and self-control per day. So if we look at the amount of energy we have, it starts off high in the morning and it just goes down all day. And we recover that when we get a night's sleep, but the time where our motivation and self-control is highest is first thing in the morning. So if you've got something you really don't want to do and you want to force yourself to do it, the best time to do it is first thing in the morning, because that's the time where you'll actually be able to get it done. Whereas if you leave it to, say, the afternoon, your motivation might be half what you had in the morning. And so what I'll end up doing is you just won't do it, right? I do that all the time. I leave it till the afternoon, then I can't face doing it. And so I've spent all day worrying about it, and then I have to move it on to tomorrow's to-do list. Whereas if we just do it first thing in the morning, we start a day with a win because we get that horrible thing out of the way. And then we can relax a bit more for the rest of the day and do things that we don't hate doing quite as much. So if you've got a horrible task on your to-do list, then it sucks, but the best way to get it out of the way, move it to first thing, even if it's not your number one priority. If it's your number one resistance task, then just get it out of the way and get it done. And you will hate the first half an hour of your day, but you will love the rest, compared to just spending all day worrying about that horrible task that you don't want to do. Okay, fine. Improving your swimming, which is improving our mood, right? When we have loads of tasks on our to-do list because a load have come in and we can't get them off fast enough, then our mood suffers because we get stressed out about it. And so what can we do to improve our swimming, improve our mood? And there's 3 things here, I think: setting realistic targets, scheduling me time, and practicing mindfulness. So let's start with realistic targets. Last year I was hanging out with a good friend and he was totally stressed out. And he said to me, yeah, I've had a really good day. I took 13 things off my to-do list, but I'm still stressed because I've got 67 more on there. And my question is, what's the point of having a to-do list that long? Because if you can get 13 things done in a day, which is a good day, right? If you knock 13 things off your to-do list, I'd be really pleased with that. Then having a to-do list with 80 items on is only going to make you miserable and stressed about how much you've got to do. And you might think those tasks are on there because they need to get done, but they're not going to get done, are they? If you can, do 13 things in a day on a good day, then anything after, anything after 13, there is no point being on that list. It's not on there because you can do it, because you're not going to do it. Its only purpose is to stress you out. So if you've got so much stuff on your to-do list that you can't possibly do it all, then you need to get rid of the stuff that is below that cut-off point, because it's serving no purpose on that list and you're only making yourself miserable. So whether you just strike it off and say, I'm not going to sweat the small stuff, this just isn't getting done, which is great. If cleaning your kitchen, just take that off your list. Watering the plants, take it off your list. Or you could have a B list of things that you're going to do when you have time. That's a separate list that you don't constantly look at when you're trying to get stuff done. And to be honest, what I think will happen is it will go on the B list and never get done. But if you can't find the strength to just cross it off your to-do list and admit to yourself that it's never getting done, put it on a B list and tell yourself that you're going to do it later. It'll be a lot easier to do and you can just get rid of it. Next, scheduling me time. Now, a lot of the time we don't spend time relaxing and looking after ourselves. Why? Because we feel guilty when we have other things to do. And this is especially true if we've got other tasks to do for other people, like our families and our kids. We feel we're not allowed to have that me time, which sounds like a fixed rule to me, right? Not allowed to do things, or I should keep working through my to-do list and not have any time off. And it's a real shame that we do this to ourselves, because self-care is not optional. And in fact, doing self-care makes us more productive in the long run because it recharges our batteries. We just run out of willpower when we're doing hard tasks all day. And one of the best ways to recharge that, other than sleep, is to just have some relaxation and me time to then build that willpower back up so that you can go about it again. So in the long run, it's not just that me time is enjoyable rather than constantly working. It's that it actually makes us more productive. But the problem is that we set these high standards for ourselves again, right? Unrealistic standards that say we should be working all the time and we should just be smashing through our to-do list all the time, and that taking relaxation time is selfish. We've already discussed that it's not selfish because it makes us more productive. But also, of course, again, it goes back to we're making ourselves miserable by not doing this. And maybe we will do a few less things, even though I don't think that's true, if we take some relaxation time. But maybe we'll be happier as well. And that's a great trade-off, right? In my book, Technical Anxiety, I talk about Steve Jobs. So Steve Jobs co-founded Apple Computers, built Pixar, came back, saved Apple Computers, made it the most valuable company in the world. You probably think to yourself, wow, he's built the most market capitalized company in the world. He must have done nothing but work. But that's not true at all. In fact, Steve Jobs, while he was building Apple Computers, was a massive hippie. He spent one summer living on a fruit farm and being a fruitarian. And he went around the country chasing down really rare Bob Dylan records because he loved Bob Dylan. And yeah, if you read his biography, the Walter Isaacson one, it talks about all the fun stuff that he did. And this completely wasn't a man who spent every hour God sends working. And in fact, what we see is the exact pattern here, is that someone who's willing to do some self-care and take some time off actually produces amazing results in the long run. So schedule in some me time. Don't just leave it up to when I'll fit it in. Put it on your to-do list that you will spend some time recharging your batteries and looking after yourself. Finally, practicing mindfulness. Because of course the misery comes from worrying about all the things we have to do. There is of course a bit of stress about constantly running around, but a lot of the time what we're doing is we're thinking about all the items still on our to-do list, and we're thinking, oh, this is just overwhelming, I'm so exhausted. And when we're doing that, we're not living in the present, which is what mindfulness is all about, right? Bringing us back to the present and stopping us worrying about the future. Because when we're worrying about all the things in our to-do list, that's what we're doing, right? We're worrying about the future. So mindfulness is difficult. It takes practice. But what we need to be doing is identifying the worry. When our mind slips forward to thinking about all those things on our to-do list, we need to gently guide it back to the present, congratulate ourselves for noticing that we've gone worrying, and then bring it back to the thing that we are currently focusing on. And as well as this, what we want to be doing is practicing identifying those common thinking errors that were earlier in the slides, and they're in the handout as well. And ultimately, as I've said before, doing all these chores and items on our to-do list are never as important as your health and your well-being and spending quality time with the people you love. And it's never easy, mindfulness. It takes a lot of practice, but just that constant, relentlessly, every time your mind goes and you notice it, you gently guide it back. Don't beat yourself up because you find yourself worrying. We're anxiety sufferers and the human mind just worries anyway. But when you spot it, congratulate yourselves and gently bring it back to that present, whatever that is. And away from worrying about all those things that still need to get done. So, to summarise, 3 things that we can do to help bring that water level back down or keep our head above the water. 1 is reducing the number of tasks in, and what we need to do is we need to practice saying no and only doing what's important. Getting more done, getting more of that water out the valley. We want to tackle the hard things first because otherwise we won't do them. We need to finish them when they're good enough and stop aiming for perfection. And we need to ask others for help and have the courage to be able to go to other people and say, do your fair share. And swimming better, dealing with the amount of stuff on our to-do list and not letting it get it down is all about setting realistic expectations, not having a million item to-do list, but things you can actually do. Schedule in some me time to recharge your batteries and just relentlessly practice that mindfulness of whenever you find yourself worrying about the future, just gently guiding yourself back. And so I think there's really 3 key themes here, which I guess are the action points if you're thinking, right, tomorrow, how do I start implementing this? And 1 is learning to say no. So allow other people to do their fair share. Stop personalising, stop pulling all the tasks onto yourself, and just remember that whenever you say yes to something, you take important time away from something else. 2 is to schedule in some me time to recharge the batteries. Life is not all about doing jobs, and giving yourself some time off will not only make you happier, but it will make yourself more productive. But it doesn't happen by accident. It doesn't happen by fitting it in around your other tasks. It happens by scheduling in that me time and putting it as a thing on your to-do list, and just having relax on there. And 3, give yourself permission to be imperfect. Stop catastrophizing. It doesn't have to be 100%. You can do 90% and it will still be better than most people are doing, and it will save you a ton of time. And setting those impossibly high standards will only make us miserable, whereas we drop our standards to a reasonable level, then we're a lot happier. And just practicing mindfulness to see the world doesn't fall apart when we don't do stuff. So just a quick word on warfare anxiety. If you haven't heard of us, maybe you're just watching this webinar for the first time, then we do loads of this kind of stuff about how to reduce anxiety, make yourself happier and just enjoy life more. And the best way to do it, there's 2 things. If you're watching this on YouTube, then just hit subscribe on our YouTube channel and you will get all the video updates that we're posting. Secondly, if you head over to our website, then you can subscribe to the Live Better newsletter, which is a weekly newsletter we send out, and that contains loads of advice on just enjoying life more, reducing anxiety and maintaining good mental health. And give it a go. If you don't like it, you can always unsubscribe, but I'm sure that you will, because there's loads of cool, fun stuff packed in there, and it's completely free. There's no cost to it, so join us and see what you think. Now, there's a workbook to go along with this. If you're thinking, wow, that's 45 minutes of loads of information packed in, and I've already forgotten half of it, which is something that anyone would do, then grab a copy of the workbook. It contains all of the summaries, the common thinking distortions, give you some actionable points. So I'll put that in the show notes and make that available so that you can download it. And it doesn't really make sense without the webinar. So what it really is a memory aid to help you remember all the stuff that we've discussed during this session. And hopefully that'll be quite useful to you. So that's the end of the presentation. I hope you've got some really useful stuff out of it. Make sure you download a copy of the workbook, and If you have any questions, then you can always drop me an email. It's just chris@warfuckanxiety.com. If you're watching this in April, then I hope you join us for the 30-day challenge. If not, join us on the Live Better newsletter, where you get loads of really interesting and useful stuff for your mental health. And I look forward to seeing you soon.